sacred book. People feel so awed by a sacred book that they don't really want to touch it and or say anything against it or contradict it or say anything that would make them feel bad because maybe God is watching them or something. I understand that. That's something, you know, that's a feeling of awe of the holy, of the sacred. And we all feel that, even though some of us don't show it in the same way. Perhaps everyone feels awe before sacred, holy things. On the other hand, in the university, we do have to try to analyze things and discuss them. That's the difference between a Sunday school class or a class you get in a synagogue or a mosque or some other place. And when you do it at the university, and I told you guys at the beginning, and that's unfortunately the difference. And so we have fewer people because of that, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, if people feel they can't do it, they should do Hinduism. Okay. All right. So we finished Genesis, right? Anything you want to deal with in the Genesis material that you feel puzzled about? Okay. So I do think if someone had done what we did for Genesis for me when I was your age, would have saved me a lot of pain in life and a lot of trouble about what to make of religious documents and holy books, whether Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or whatever. The Muslims think that we rip the Quran apart, don't they? But they haven't seen what we do to other books. So we're not ripping them apart, but I mean analyze them and so on. So they're all sensitive and oh, he hates Islam or something like that. No, we don't hate anything. In fact, I love this book, as you may not have noticed, but it is true, I do. And I think it's a beautiful book. But I do think that one should understand something about it and that one shouldn't be overawed by anything. One should realize it's a human book and that we're human beings and human beings produce it. So that's really something that I think is important. Well, the same problems continue in Exodus, unfortunately. The same problems will also continue in Joshua. I wouldn't continue with the same kind of meticulous analysis of what we did in the previous books. But let's take a look what we've got here. So basically, 1:7, the sons of Israel became fruitful, grew in numbers. I don't even really know what even. I'm probably not going to look at the actual text lines anymore to an extent, because I wouldn't be able. I'm not such an expert. The guy who wrote the Bible, maybe he can do it better, but it's up to you. They increased and grew immensely powerful. Then a new king arose, line 8, who knew not Joseph. That's really a great line, who knew not Joseph. It says it all. How long were they supposed to be here in slavery here, or enslaved? I'm not sure the dates are totally reliable in terms of, I'm not sure the people who put this down knew the dates any more than a lot of other people did. But I think, isn't there something like 400 years or something like that? I forget how many years they're supposed to have been there. Or 30 maybe, I'm not sure. Somewhere it might say it. In any event, I told you a little bit about the Hyksos, the foreign invaders of Egypt around the 1600 BC period, who ruled for 100 or 2 years, 100 to 200 years in Egypt before a new dynasty came in. And probably, as I said, this could have reflected that period. Because even if you got a native Egyptian dynasty, it probably wouldn't have been as easy for Joseph to rise under a native Egyptian dynasty as he might have done under a more Semitic dynasty. And the Hyksos were considered to be Semites, meaning people from the Syrian, Mesopotamian area somewhere, shepherds, Bedouin, something like that. So I can write that on the board again, Hyksos. And so most people put this, so I think this is actually pretty good historical memory of something really exciting that took place among our people. Remember I told you that Hebrew was a word that the text usually uses in what context? Yeah, maybe, but also what others call them, I'm not sure it's always derogatory, but it could be, yeah. It's not bad. But Israelites is their own name among themselves, which happens a lot. I think there are groups even today that they know what they're called, like the Sioux Nation. We call them Sioux, but I'm sure they call them something else. They have their own inner name for themselves. We don't mean by Sioux to derogatory. I think we have a respect for Sioux, but they have their own vocabulary. So the idea that there were a lot of slaves. Again, I don't know if I'm mixing up 400 years with 400,000 slaves, or how many, I don't know how many slaves are supposed to be, but how many Israelites are there finally? I don't know, a lot of them. 500,000, 600,000, I don't know how many they're supposed to be. But if you can find the precise, our number man, some of you realize there was a number man in the Noah story that you realize he was very interested in numbers. Okay. Now, he should tell us how many there were, but the picture is that there were cities of Pithom and Ramses. Now these cities, I think, have been located. I'm not sure if we can be that precise here, but in the Delta. You know, Egypt, the Nile Delta is sort of like New Orleans, where the Mississippi comes out into the Delta, and it's a swampy area, sort of, because these big rivers make deltas. The Euphrates, Tigris Euphrates in Iraq, there's a whole delta region down there by Basra. So these cities are really up by the Mediterranean. They're not really cities, that's where they've been identified. But the problem is that they didn't seem to come into existence until after Ramesses' time, which is around 1200 BC. So again, the dates are a little bit worrisome here. You follow me? A little bit skewed here, and I can't do anything with it. Now, a lot of scholars have come along. You see it on TV a lot because TV likes to have people with controversial views. They have coming along and they're talking about there's no proof the Exodus occurred and so on and so forth. No, well, how would you have proof? You know, where's the proof? And the Egyptians aren't going to commemorate it or anything like that. So that there's no, or that there was any conquest of Israel or Palestine by the Jews, or that there even was an Egyptian sojourn. Well, these things are hardly proof, but the people obviously remembered something like this occurring. This is in the folk memory. I don't think they made it all up. I think something happened. I don't know if the numbers are reliable, but I'm sure that something did happen down here. Now, a very good theory about Moses that was advanced by German scholars in the 19th century. I can't name you the actual ones, but Sigmund Freud picked it up in his book, Moses and Monotheism. It was one of the last books that he wrote in his life. He wrote it when he was in England. To write a book like that, you need psychoanalysis, actually, because the book is half mad itself. So it's not surprising to me that he invented psychoanalysis, because as he goes along, he really completely loses it. But he's an old man by this time. I mean, he's got the Jews killed Moses in the wilderness, and therefore they had to kill the father, so they had to worship the son later, and he brings in the Jesus thing. I mean, he's really gone kind of bonkers. But he starts off well in the book, and his thesis originally is that Moses is not a Hebrew at all. That the actual stories here of Moses and the bulrushes and all those favorite stories are, well, we know they are somewhat mythological, because there are God stories about various gods. I'm not an expert on various comparative mythologies, but Osiris, I think, was found in the bulrushes and things like that. And there are all kinds of legends and stories that were maybe absorbed into that kind of presentation. But that's to Hebraicize Moses. That's to make him one of ours. That actually he looked like an Egyptian prince. He talked like an Egyptian prince. He had an Egyptian prince name. And if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then the conclusion often is it is a duck. So Freud said Moses was an Egyptian. And the stories Hebraicize him. You know, so, oh, well, we actually birthed him, but she put him in a bulrush, and then, you know, the Egyptian princess found him, and so on. But you see, the name that they give him is a Hebrew name, but Mos in Egyptian is a perfectly good Egyptian name. Ramos, Amos, Amosis, Tutmos, Tutmoses. Moses in Egyptian means something like son of. That's why all the rulers have often Moses in their name. I don't know if you ever noticed that, because we don't know a lot of Egyptian rulers, but all the ones we know have Moses in their name. So, you know, the Hebrews, because a similar word in Hebrew is Moshe. So, you know, Jews call him Moshe, to pull out. Like all the other stories we've had. Okay, the story is pull out, we'll give him a story about pull out, because Pharaoh's daughter pulled him out of the Nile, right? That's the presentation here, isn't it? However, there's a loophole, and I've already told you about that, but I can tell you again. There's a weakness to that story. The weakness to that story is, why would Pharaoh's daughter give him a Hebrew name? If she's naming him, and that's the presentation, she'd give him an Egyptian name anyway. So, I mean, you know, the whole story really doesn't hold up to historical analysis. It holds up to literary analysis, which is fine. The stories work on the literary level, as I've told you over and over again. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It only matters what people think happened. It doesn't matter if Jesus existed or he didn't exist. It doesn't matter if he could do the miracles he did or he couldn't. It doesn't matter if he walked on the waters. It doesn't matter if he could take swine and put them into pig flocks and they run off mountains and stuff like that. That doesn't matter. It's what people, that's what people believe. That's what they think happened, and they don't really care what actually did happen. The myth takes over the reality. Now, well, that's what really happened. No, I know that's what you say happened. But I'm sure that that's not what really did happen. And, you know, that's the problem of a religious document vis-a-vis a non-religious document. Like scientific treatises are dull as can be because they're not poetic. And so when you get a scientific picture of the Big Bang or something like that, or other kinds of things, it's not going to be mass marketable like a religious document is. Because a religious document, as someone like Jung would say, appeals to archetypes. So anyway, I don't want to argue with you whether it's possible to take evil spirits and put them into swine. I mean, you know, ancients thought that. I don't think moderns generally do. And I frankly don't even think moderns think there is such a thing as an evil spirit. You know, I mean, people have evil spirits, but nothing you can do about it. You can't take it out like a tapeworm. They are what they are, and you can't exercise them. And people are what they are, and usually they get worse as they get older. So I mean, it's usually age and chemistry and things like that, and you can't change things like that. Genealogy. So that's what we've decided in the modern period. Most of us, not all of us, most of us. So those stories reflect their time and place, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. It took me about until I was 40 till I was brave enough to say that. I, like you, accepted the stories in the New Testament at face value. I've told you that, and they puzzled me. They puzzled me because I said, I want to do some of those things like everyone else. And I think I told you, I finally gave it all up when I got to India when I was around 25 or so. And I said, you know, I threw my glasses into the Bay of Bombay, and I said, that's it. I want to see now without, I don't want any crutches anymore, you know. And I deserve this. I deserve this. I got this far on my own. You know, I went across deserts before anyone ever did things like that. I got to India from Europe for $50, hitchhiking in local buses and things like that. You know, I deserve the strength I showed, that God should show me some kindness. And of course, what happened? I couldn't see a thing, and my eyes just got worse. So I began to realize, as I told you, the problem was not in me, it was in the stories. I mean, it was in, and you know, it's hard for anyone to say that. You can't stand up against all society, all your parents, all your culture, all your priests, all your ministers, everybody, movie actors, politicians, great men, Freud, you name it, you know, Tolstoy. Who are you to stand up against anyone like that? You know, you should live a short time. And that's why I think it's nice that people tell you that this is what you need to worry about and this is what you don't, because life is tough enough anyway. So the point is, I would have appreciated some of the things that maybe you don't like hearing from me, but if someone had told me some of these things, it would have saved me a lot of trouble, you know, growing up. In any case, the point being, getting back to Moses and the problem of standing against the text. What are you going to do with Moses, Pharaoh's daughter, giving him a Hebrew name? You know, it just shoots the whole thing up. But it doesn't matter. That's what people think happened. That's fine. So we know what people think happened, and we know what's in the text. So Freud went on from there, and he picked up theories that you now hear modern people speaking about all the time. If you go on, I heard a program the other night on, I don't know, it was the Discovery Channel, or the, may have been public television, National Geographic, looking at mummies' tombs and things. And so these guys were talking about the fact that Akhenaten was something revolutionary and that maybe he influenced Moses. That's been known for almost 100, 200 years now, that there was a heretic Egyptian pharaoh around this time before Ramesses called Akhenaten. And he's called Akhenaten because originally he was, he changed his name because he began to worship this thing. I think he was called Amenhotep. And when he had his reforms, I think he was Amenhotep IV, I'm not sure exactly. Amun is the ram god that they used to always worship at all the shrines in Egypt. And when he canceled that ram god out, and all their priests as well, you see, he's like a Moses character right there. And he took the name, I think, brother or son or something of Aton. The new god that he was going to say was the sun god, is what it was. And he said there was only one god, and it was only, and he changed the capital. He moved it to a new place, to a city called Amarna, away from Thebes and Karnak, which is where it used to be. Which is, you see those programs? That's where all those great structures are and tombs that they look at. It's about 100 miles or so, 200 miles north of this. You know, not near where Cairo is, which is further north, but not as far away from Cairo as Thebes and Karnak and those places, to further south. And by the way, these cities they mentioned are even further north yet. Again, I'm not a great, I'm not so great, but I think Cairo is here. Amarna would be here. And Thebes and so on would be, Thebes is on one side of the river, or on an island, and Karnak, or vice versa, is on the other. It's where the old capital was. And then down here is where the cataracts of the Nile, at the beginning of the Sudan. And up here is where these cities that they mentioned here, up in the Delta. Here's the Delta. That's basically the layout, if you want to call it. So he moved this capital to Amarna. There was nothing there. He built the whole city for himself, and the ruins are there because it only survived for 30 or 40 years, and then it became deserted. He was overthrown, or he died under mysterious circumstances. We don't know anything about that. While he was king, he wiped away all of the inscriptions and That's what they used to do. They used to rub people out. If they didn't like it, they'd take their inscriptions and just chisel them out. It's like you taking a sign down that you don't like, you know. They would just chisel and cross them out like that. So we find places that his name then is crossed out by his enemies. Then he crossed out his opponent's names from their monuments. In any case, everyone knew these ideas at Ignat, and it's in Freud. Freud said that Moses was one of Ignatin's associates who, when Ignatin's reforms failed, he took the children of Israel out of, he took the slaves or whatever it was, or refugees or whoever, and went out with them in this chaotic situation. And that made a lot of sense. So that's a good book on that basis. The rest of the book is horrendously stupid. They say, how can you stand and say Freud is stupid? It's possible to do if you have a brain. You can say anyone is stupid if you think you can do it in a higher level than that person. There's no reason why you shouldn't. You shouldn't just dismiss people as stupid without looking at what they say and then try to analyze it. But like I'm giving you what I think are the virtues as far as the defects. So Freud is not a genius. He's a coke addict, and he's a cokehead. But he's got some good insights. He also made everyone insane with this couch thing that really, most of the time, doesn't go anywhere, except become self-indulgent sort of process that people go through and think that they're achieving something that doesn't necessarily achieve anything. But I'm not sure most things, chemical things, are not much better. So I mean, I'm not going to say one's better than the other, but this guy is not a genius. Einstein, yeah, certainly Einstein, E equals mc squared. That is something incredibly beyond most people's powers. In any case, the beginning of Moses monotheism, he's an old man, he's in England, and of course he's dealing with the Nazi problem, and he's had to flee Austria, and that book is interesting as far as his attempt to wrestle with his own culture, Jewish culture, which he always ignored. So he was forced to wrestle with his own culture, and that's what he did with it. It's worth reading. It is worth reading. At least the beginning is. And the idea he presents that Moses was an Egyptian, I think, makes a lot of sense in this context. And in the context of the Ignat and Reformation. Otherwise, it's hard to understand what really did happen here. It really is hard to understand what really did happen here.
But Akhenaten wasn't one of the Hyksos, right?
No, he wasn't. He was later. But that's a king of, it doesn't mean that they couldn't have come down under the Hyksos and been slaves under the period of Ignat. That's another story. He was not one of the Hyksos. He was after the Hyksos were overthrown. It'll be about maybe 250 years later. Yeah, the Hebrew slaves could have been the remnant of the Hyksos and others they had brought in. You follow me? The Semitic Hebrew slaves. That doesn't mean there's 600,000. Numbers tend to get exaggerated in ancient times. Zeros are often added to numbers. That's the best I can do for you. The rest you'll have to find out yourself, okay? Because we have to keep moving, and I just wanted you to know that those are some of the things to think about. The Hebrew, as I told you, most scholars think comes from this word hapiru and habiru, which are these outlaw sort of intermediary groups of people between Iraq and Egypt, Mesopotamia and Egypt, who are good times they're tradesmen, caravanners, bad times they're outlaw bandits. That's pretty normal, and they just don't have any affiliation. So they can coalesce. Maybe we see gypsies as just gypsies, but gypsies know all their tribes and clans, and they have all their internal history, you see. So it could be that the Habiru, who we think come from the Hebrew come from the word Habiru or Apiru, look to others like they have no internal history. But then here we have their internal traditions. That's the best we can do of this situation. By the way, around this time too, these Trojan War people, the sea peoples, the Greek banditi or bandits, who had been probably set loose by the eruption at Santorini, Tira, which is sort of like a Krakatoa of the Mediterranean, which occurred in the 1400s BC sometime, 1420s, I think, 1430s, which really, destroyed Cretan civilization probably, in terms of didn't wipe it all out, but it ruined it. And just like, it happened in these tsunamis that we just saw, they just, wiped whole places out, navies and whatever they had. They didn't recover from them, they didn't all disappear, but there were also invasions taking place at this time too. It was all very complicated, but certainly the sea peoples did come to Egypt. Probably the same groups of people that the Trojan Wars are celebrating about Troy. Those kind of outlaw sort of people on ships, like Vikings, but Greek Vikings, if you want to call them. They have some good portraits of them in headdresses and everything else in wars in Egypt. I think it was Ramesses again, or one of these pharaohs, probably Ramesses, one of the Ramesses, who fought them and then bragged about it and had pictures drawn on, wall paintings and inscriptions about his victories over the sea peoples. And but basically he sent them up the coast away from Egypt, and they settled in the coast of Palestine, a lot of them. And now in the Bible they become called Philistines. They're Greek sea peoples from Mycenae. So they come in around this time too, which is why we say that the Abimelech stories about Philistines in Abraham's time are anachronisms. At least that's what archaeology seems to show. Maybe wrong. I can't tell you, but this is the bare historical outlines of non-biblical material that you can bring to bear on this. So even the story of the Exodus, I saw, I was watching the other night, this really good presentation on how the 12 plagues connected to the Exodus can be explained in terms of problems in Nile flooding from up the Nile further up. I forget what exactly the problem was, but the red has to do with some superabundance of algae or some substance of that kind that then comes down and kills all the fish. That's what we have in the stories here. And then the frogs flee from it, and then they come back in a plague and so on. And so all this series of things that they enumerate is explainable in terms of some of these flood-like conditions of a certain algae situation from further up the Nile. Again, that's one explanation. That's probably possible. The other explanation is a lot of this stuff comes from memory of the Krakatoa, not the Krakatoa, the Thera eruption, which would have had a devastating effect in Egypt too. We saw what happened with the recent tsunami, right? That hit Thailand and the Ceylon. It also went as far as the African coast. Thera, would have been like Ceylon. It would have been like, Egypt would have been like Ceylon. The coast would have been flocked. And that would have had an effect on the Nile, and the idea that there was a wall of water and stuff like that. I mean, all that could be in the book memory. From the, convulsions from the Thera eruption. I don't know, how many have heard of Thera Santorini situation? Well, you've seen there are Greek actual remains there that are so beautiful. Some of the wall paintings that have been dug out from the Mycenaean or Cretan civilization that existed there are just so exquisite, it just like takes your breath away. They're so beautiful, they're like there yesterday. And these people had time to leave. They weren't just overwhelmed. They knew it was coming because there's no bodies there. They got out on ships, most of them. They knew that the thing was going. They could probably hear the earthquake and had plenty of warning that this thing was going to blow. And they took off, but their city is still there, buried in the lava that's been dug out. So we even have pictures of what the city looked like from some of the wall paintings. So you could look at that. So that would have been some of the setting in motion of these Greek bandit sort of ship peoples who were just raiding all over the eastern Mediterranean after that. Now, you can't get the absolute connections because we don't have any newspapers from that period, but some of it, the Homeric stories and everything, probably are an outgrowth of all of that. And this situation of the memory of this weird thing that occurred in Egypt could have been, you know, in folk memory, put together with the whole story of leaving Egypt under extreme circumstances. Maybe it happened at the same time, I don't know. The dates are a little bit skewed if it's the same time. I mean, is it 1400 BC that they went out, or is it 1200 BC that they went out? No, it's impossible. Nobody knows the actual dates. You follow me? So it's very difficult to say. Okay, so that's the background to this material here. So we can't date Moses with any precision. Nobody knows if these are 1400 BC or 1200 BC events. Is it before Ramesses or after Ramesses? Ramesses the Great is around 1200 BC or something. 1200 seems too late for all of it to happen and to conquer Palestine and all that sort of thing, and then to get to a Davidic monarchy by 1000 BC is 1050, 150 years later. It just seems to be not enough time elapsing. Then archaeological evidence says a lot of, there's no evidence of destruction, you know, in the 1400 BC period in Palestine. I think there is evidence of destruction in the maybe 1200 BC period. Again, it's all very confusing. That's why some archaeologists say that the Jews didn't conquer Palestine. They never left. Only some of them left and then came back. And then their stories were absorbed by the people who stayed. There's no way to sort this out, and I wouldn't even try. But I just can tell you what the different theories are. Okay, let's go back to the story. So the new king, all that, you see, that's what's so great about storytelling. Everything I just told you is subsumed under one sentence. A king arose who knew not Joseph. That's all. That covers all of what I just told you, which is a pretty fantastic story. And he says, look, these Israelites are getting so numerous. You know, they're increasing. We got to make their life worse than it is. I can't conceive that was. Well, people have slaves that are being useful. Why would they want to limit them? So again, this is the storyteller working here, and you can take or leave what you think is appropriate. That's up to you. But it's a good story. No one ever forgets it. And the sons of Israel then were feared by everyone, 9:13. And so I guess, does it say king or pharaoh in your book, line 15, the king of Egypt? Say pharaoh of Egypt or king of Egypt? Yeah, well, it's probably the pharaoh. So, but mine says king too, but you could probably read pharaoh. I'm sure the pharaoh spoke to the Hebrew midwives. I'm sure that he had time for that. You know, again, I'm sorry to be cruel, but it's a good story. I like it, but still. And they know Shiphrah and Puah. We know that you look after the Hebrew women. Watch for the, what's your Bible have? What are they looking out for there? The two what? I hate to tell you, but that's like, you know what I mean? What do you call them in polite language? Cojones? Testicles, I guess you should say. Look out for the testicles. You know, if they're there, kill them.
I'm sorry, where are you?
You got me, man. 16, 700. Let the women live. Usually they want the girls to die because they're the ones breeding. So again, all this makes no sense to me, but I'll let it go. I guess they're afraid of the men because I think they might fight. And then, of course, they don't do it. So the Pharaoh's talking to these midwives. It's hard to believe. Pharaoh, untouchable, you know, totally. He isn't even here. I mean, Pharaoh's down in Thebes, Karnak, 300 miles south, 400 miles south. And this is up northern. And I can't. What can I tell you? The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They give birth before we get there. Okay, that's a good story. So So then Pharaoh is really angry. He says, okay, chuck them all in the river. Now, in Genesis, we didn't hear the Levites were so good, but by this time in Exodus, I guess the priest caste is basically Levites, and some of this may be priestly material. They're proud of being Levites. They're not interested in the story about how the Levites went through the city of, what city did they go through and put Jacob in a bad odor? Shechem? Shechem? And what did they do because what had happened? That's it, sister was raped. Dina had been raped. Dina. In any case, so there was a man of the tribe of Levi who had taken a woman of Levi as his wife. And she conceived and gave birth to a son. And they hid him in a basket, a famous story, which seems to reflect some of the material in some of Cyrus' material that we know. And set him afloat. This is what Freud says, this is where the adoption of Moses into the Hebrew background comes into play. Or, if you like the straightforward way of looking at it, just read the story as it is. And Pharaoh's daughter, now line 5, it is Pharaoh's daughter, is that right? In line 5, does it say Pharaoh? Must be a different word. So the writer knows Pharaoh from king, so it must be 2 text lines. One is using king, one is using Pharaoh. I haven't looked at that before, but that's a good point. Pharaoh's daughter now sees him, but notice, the child's sister. Does the narrator know the child's sister's name? Not as far as we can tell. Does the narrator know the child's mother and father's name? Not as far as we can tell. He just knows they're Levites. The priestly genealogist is going to fill that in later. So this story writer originally, I don't think knows the names. We do, because we always put everything together. Maybe we conflate material. Maybe we shouldn't. But anyway, she finds him. She says, go find someone who can suckle this child. Of course, they don't get the child's real mother. And when the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who treated him like a son, and she named him Moses because I drew him out of the water. There you are. Pharaoh's daughter names him Moses. Freud says, no, he was an Egyptian right from the start, an Egyptian noble of some kind, probably in the court of this innovating pharaoh, Akhenaten. And when his reforms collapsed, he was part of these reforms, and he somehow got a relationship with the Hebrews, and they want to Hebraicize him in these stories. I don't know which is the best. It's very hard to believe that a Hebrew would be brought up by a Pharaoh's daughter in her court in this manner. And later he's mistaken for an Egyptian all the time. And also later in the stories, if you notice, it says he's has uncircumcised lips. Well, that's part of another series of stories. He's of uncircumcised lips because he supposedly can't speak well. One thing, he doesn't seem to be able to speak to the Hebrews very well, but 2 then is he doesn't want to speak in front of Pharaoh. He needs his brother Aaron to come and do it for him. It's all very mixed up. And I don't have all, but Freud says the reason they say he can't speak well because he didn't speak Hebrew, he only spoke Egyptian anyway. Which, in this story could be the case in any case. But all these things are problems, imperfectly remembered. Was there a leader like Moses? Oh, I think there was definitely a leader like Moses. The memory is so strong that, there was somebody. I think there's more about Moses than Abraham, frankly. I mean, it's a stronger presentation. Moses is a stronger presentation in terms of data, detail, and everything else than Abraham. So if you want to argue about was there a Moses or was there an Abraham, I think you'd have to go for sure about Moses. Something happened like this. But what? I'll leave that to you to decide. I wouldn't even try to figure it out. I have no idea. So then, in any case, he was grown up and he was walking around because he was, noble, watching the work. And he saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew. See now, they're Hebrews to the Egyptians. And therefore, when no one was looking, he killed the Egyptian and buried him. And later he saw two of the Hebrews fighting. This is a different text line in terms than the Israelite text line here. And he said, stop doing this. And then they laugh at him. Who made you king over us? Prince over us? Are you going to kill me like you did the Egyptian? This is a great storytelling. I smell the yawist here running around. This is still great stuff. And Moses knows that. You see, he doesn't paint everything like I'm doing. Tell you, hey, a few strokes, bam, 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 we get the picture. This guy could do well in Hollywood. He could write great scripts. And he knew that the situation was known, and that if Pharaoh heard about it, he'd be in trouble. Although, I don't think he would be if he's a nobleman. I really, the whole thing, again, if a nobleman inflicted justice on people who were misbehaving, I don't think he'd be in any trouble at all. Just me, wondering person. I'm not the script writer here. So. Be that as it may, that's what the story says. So he runs away to Midian. Where's Midian? Who is Midian? Midian is one of the descendants of Ishmael, according to some of the genealogies. I think in others, he's a descendant of Esau. I get it all mixed up, but if you can look, he was in the Joseph story as the Midianites, and the Ishmaelites. It's all, anyway, basically it's Sinai tribes. Sinai between Palestine and Egypt, or Israel, Judea, and Egypt. And he meets there a priest. Joseph, by the way, married into a priest. I didn't emphasize that very much. One of you pointed out that Joseph's wife was a priest of the daughter of On, or the daughter of a priest of On. And you see, so they're Israelite tribes, and some mother isn't even Hebrew Jewish background, according to them, and they recognize them. So people who want everybody, like in Judaism, people talk about conversion and things. The Jews back in these days weren't so big on conversion, all that sort of thing. If you were with us or with them, as they would have put it, then you were part of it, part of us, as they would have put it. If you felt part of it, you were part of it. Moses marries out, if you want to call it that. Joseph marries out. Two principal heroes. David marries, basically. David's mother is a Jewish woman. All through the traditions there. So when any of you are ever talking to rabbis or people like that, and some of them are making a fuss about the requirements and all this sort of thing, just point the Bible stories to these people. I mean, there's no big deal in the Bible about interrelationships with different peoples in terms of who's part of the people. The biggest heroes. Moses marries a non-Jewish woman. Joseph marries a non-Jewish woman. David's mother is a non-Jewish woman. And so on and so forth and so on and so forth. So they're really not, they're not too concerned about it. As long as you feel part of the tradition, then you are, is what the Bible is presenting to be. Anyway, Moses, this is the usual meeting at the well, isn't it? Remember, we had Jacob meeting at the well, and others meeting at the well. So, the meeting at the well story, and as usual, seeing the first woman that's there, And this time, what's her name? The Bible knows her name, where it doesn't even know his mother and his sister's name. Her name is Zipporah. Line 22. And her father is Reuel, R-E-U-E-L, a priest of Midian, 7 daughters. I remember Philip in the New Testament, he had 7 daughters who were prophetesses. Well, I'm not going to really believe that one either. But in any case, that's similar. Maybe this is the source of the Philip material. I don't know where those writers got that material from. But in any case, this may be so. Maybe he did have 7 daughters. At least it doesn't say they were all prophetesses. In any case, he likes Zipporah as usual, the one he meets. We never hear about the rest. One of the problems with Reuel, he pops up in various places in different parts of the next 3 or 4 books. Leviticus, Numbers, which we're not going to do, and Deuteronomy. We don't have time to do those. But he gets name changes. Sometimes he's Reuel. In this text, he'll have another name almost immediately. What's the other name he's given? Jethro. And then later on, he's Hobab. So there's 3 different text lines that give him 3 different names. I don't think that he's 3 different people, but that's the problem with text lines and naming. It isn't very clear. So at the moment he's Reuel, but later he's going to be Jethro, and then ultimately in, I think, Numbers, he's Hobab, H-O-B-A-B. And I don't know what his real name was. Well, Moses' first name, born son, is what? Gershom. 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 And that's because the word ger means foreigner. So again, because I was a stranger in a strange land or something like that. Again, interpreting names in terms of your situation. But there's going to be a problem. Moses and Aaron are going to start to overlap in these stories somewhat. Someone is slowly going to, that's what we're going to see in this exercise. That's basically what the main point I want to make clear to you. Someone is insinuating Aaron into the Moses stories to some extent, because he's not even mentioned here. And the priests take their descent from Aaron. Aaron is the father of the priesthood because of certain things that are said here. But as we'll see, Aaron is portrayed somewhat negatively by some of the materials. In Hebrew, the word Kohen, Kohanim, is the name for priest. So if you see today, for instance, someone called Cohn, Kahana, Khan, the movie actor, what's his name, James Caan, all these people are priests. Any variation on that name, and then other variations that come spin off it, that they take to westernize their names, and then all these westernized versions of Levi, Levin, Lowenstein, what else can I think of? Levi Trousers, all these variants, although that was Levi Strauss' first name. But I can't even think of all the different names that spin off from Levi that people take, because they're proud of their priestly ancestry. But the Cohen are the high priests, the Levites are the general priest class, mostly the lower priests. So even the Aaron descendants are higher than the Levites within the Levite tribe. Moses is a Levite, but he gets short shrift. What I'm trying to get at is Aaron will have a son called Gershom, G-E-R-S-H-O-N. And it's not really clear how Gershom differs from Gershom. And I think we're already getting confusion in the genealogies right from the start. Well, okay, let's leave that and move along here. Chapter 3. Here we are. We already have Reuel has changed his name in any case. In chapter 3:1, he's Jethro. You see that? So by 3:1, he's already Jethro, priest of Midian. And you see, the place is Horeb. Maybe that's where Hobab comes from. I don't know. But anyway, the place is Horeb, the mountain of God. And this is certainly Yahweh, this one. An angel of Yahweh appeared to him. This is a beautiful little story too. And he sees a burning bush that isn't consumed. It's hard to ever forget this. And like other stories where they say, Jacob, Jacob, come here, or Esau, Esau, come here. Here I am, here I am. Moses says, here I am, when the voice cries out to him, Moses, Moses, here I am. All these tender things, I'm coming. The bush was burning, line 3, and it wasn't consumed. And God was in the bush. I think I once told you previously in the class, if I did, I'll tell you that animistic religions before monotheism, generally most religions around the world at that time, thought of these things like trees, rivers, mountains, stones as sacred in some way. And the reason we call it animism is because they gave us a living spirit to them. Anima in Greek is the spirit. That's what moves animals. That's why we call animals animals. The anima was the moving spirit, so they would give a living spirit to these things. And this is a perfect example of a pagan, if you like, symbol, this burning bush, out of which God spoke. Or later on, it's out of the mountain. Well, those are really non-monotheistic symbols, monotheized, but it's still a beautiful story. Take your shoes, for the place on which you stand is holy. Muslims to this day, you go to a mosque, they take off their shoes. I think in the Temple of Jerusalem, people didn't wear shoes. If they did, it was a certain kind of a special footwear. They didn't, or they went barefoot. The priest went barefoot in the temple. And, that was totally for sure that you took your shoes off in sacred places. You still do in mosques today. The ground on which you stand is holy. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And he covered his face, afraid to look at God. I mean to deliver you out of the hands of the Egyptians and bring you out to a land of milk and honey. Famous stories. The home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. And I send you to Pharaoh. And Moses said, well, I can't go. Who am I? Line 12. I'm going to give you a sign so they know you. But look. What should I say to them? 13. Tell them the God of your father sent you. But suppose they ask me his name. What should I say his name is? This is the revelation of the name Yahweh to Moses. But we already heard earlier that he was the first to use the word Yahweh in the book of Genesis, didn't we? I forget which person, Enoch or somebody. Remember those things? And he was the first to. So, again, the story isn't going to be totally consistent in terms of previous data. Tell them, and now we see that the word Yahweh really is a verb, meaning he who is or he who creates. He who is without the causative, he who causes to be with the causative. Tell them, Ahweh sent you. See, in the first person, it's Ahweh. If you know Hebrew, in the third person, it's Yahweh. Tell them, Ahweh sent you. I, who caused to be myself to be. The person doesn't need a cause. I am who am, if you like the English translation. Tell them, I am who am has sent you, Yahweh, which is the first person of Yahweh. That shows you that Yahweh is not just some sort of wild and woolly crazy name, Yah, or whatever. It's an actual meaningful verb having to do with being or creator. An intellectual thing, which to us sounds like gobbledygook because we don't know Hebrew. And it is not Jehovah, I can assure you. Even though Jehovah works quite well in English, so might as well use it. There's nothing wrong with it in terms of, but it's not. It's not. You couldn't say Ahova. You wouldn't be able to say Ahova because it doesn't work as a Hebrew verb. It's just a mistranslation. And if your parents or sisters, brothers, friends want you to give you the proof that Jehovah isn't Jehovah, just show them this passage here. In the first person, when God speaks, he changes it to the first person. If anyone doesn't understand that, even though you don't know Hebrew, it's this. This is the third person. Y or I, A or A. That's what's changed here. This means I, this means he. So y is he did something, A is I did something. That's it. Yeah.
When in your studies, did you have to learn Arabic?
I do know Arabic, yeah.
Which did you find more difficult to learn?
Arabic's one. Arabic's got a vocabulary 5 times what Hebrew has. Hebrew is mostly a written language and can be mastered in a, you know, you're not going to speak it, but you can learn it pretty quick. You can learn it in a year or 2. Arabic, you might take 4 or 5 years to learn. Okay? That's the problem of the American Army is facing in Iraq. They don't have any decent translators. Do classical Hebrew if you want to do, because you can do it. You can do it, and the rest. I mean, I can't just take a text without a dictionary totally, but you can work. You can deal with it. None of them you'll ever learn if you want to speak Hebrew or Arabic like a native in Israel or Arab worlds. You'll never be able to do it unless you've been sleeping with a partner of the opposite sex who speaks that for 4 or 5 years. So then you might be able to do it, but you'll never do it as a visitor. You've got to have intimate contact with someone on a day-to-day basis to do it. I'm sure Chinese is the same. It's probably very difficult for a non-Chinese person or a Japanese person to learn. You know, and I know very many Chinese people who go to these schools on the weekends where they have to learn these languages. So their parents want them to keep the culture up. It's a real chore. I mean, it's really tough. Of course, they've got people at home who can still speak it, so that helps. But you know, these things are not easy to do, and you'll never do it as a native speaker without someone intimate around you speaking. I realized when I was about 20-some years old that I never was going to do it. I never had an Arab girlfriend or a Hebrew girlfriend or anything like that, and I knew that I could never get the intimacy with someone close enough to be able to do that without that situation. It's impossible. It's hard to be hard to do. But to read it, yeah. Study reading. Don't even try to master the spoken language. Do it, but don't think you're going to be able to do it without years and years and years of practice. Now, French and Italian, those are easy because they're like English. They have slight variations, but you say, what, French, Italian like English? Yeah, they are. They work like English. There are lots of common words. French and English have many common words. Fondation, foundation, école, school. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of words that are almost exactly the same. So, I mean, that you can do. And of course, if you speak French or Spanish or Italian, then you immediately can speak the other 3 languages with almost 2 or 3 months of work, nothing to it. Because they're all Latin languages based on the same. German gets tougher, Greek gets tougher, and so it goes. Okay? Does that help you out? That's good to have someone tell you so you don't have any illusions about anything. Anyway, Ahoy, I am one. That much I can do for you. So if you have somebody who's making other claims about this, just show them this passage. Okay, so I love this passage. I think it's a beautiful passage. Tell them, I am sent me to you. Tell them, Yahweh sent me to you, you see. And you are to say this, tell them, Yahweh sent me to you. That is, or Yahweh. I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm just doing an English approximation. Probably I think it's probably even pronounced differently than that, but it would be spelled Yahweh or Yahweh. But I think it was actually ultimately pronounced Yahoo. Because all the prophets are called things like Isaiah is Yeshayahu, with Yahoo, God's name at the end of his name. Jeremiah, Yeremiyahu. And I think that's how they spoken in everyday speech, Yahoo. Like the Now Yahoo is the big internet provider. So I'm a Yahoo I'm a Yahoo provider just for the name. I'm on board. Whoever was original enough to get a name like that, he's got me. I'm signed up. So yeah, Yahoo. I think perhaps that's probably how we. Something. We're not pronouncing it right. That's for sure. So now you're saying this. Go to the elders, this is beautiful. Open up. Tell them Yahweh, the God of your fathers, appeared to me, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And that he's visited and seen the suffering there, that Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has come to meet us. Tell them you want to go out in the wilderness, 3 days' journey. And if this doesn't happen, I'm going to strike the Egyptians with a mighty hand, and I'm going to work wonders there. And I will give this people, line 21, such prestige in the eyes of the Egyptians that they will not go empty-handed. And this is really interesting. They will go adorned, and they will plunder the Egyptians when they go out. Most people miss that they're going to plunder the Egyptians when they go out, line 22. They're a pretty tough group. They're going to go out, they're going to get out. Now, I don't know how much that's true or not, but one last thing about the plundering. I think that comes in because somebody was going to say, when they're out in the wilderness, how do they make this rich ark with all these rich materials and all this jewelry and different tapestries and things that they claim that they have there to make this wonderful Ark of the Covenant that they tell you all about here? Well, the answer is they plundered the Egyptians when they went out. That's the answer that the text gives you. So the text is already providing you with that answer in advance to some problem that you may see. Well, we go on here. And God, look, suppose they will not listen. A little like Abraham arguing with God in the Sodom and Gomorrah stories. What's that in your hand? A staff. Throw it on the ground. Throws it on the ground. Pick up its tail. And it's a snake. And he picks it up and it's a staff again. So then tell them this so he's going to get signs like Jesus in the New Testament is going to have signs. But frankly, that's not a bad sign in Egypt, the one we're just talking about here. Why? Egyptian priests, even in the Hellenistic period, were known, and even in the modern period, I've heard of people who've seen this, that you could make a snake become stiff like a rigor mortis sort of situation, and then you pick it up and become, wriggling again. There is this situation that's known among magician-type people in the Mediterranean world that snakes this could be done with snakes for people who knew how to do this kind of stuff. So this is magic sort of stuff. So Moses, of course, later on, his snakes are going to eat the Egyptian snakes, but never mind. The point is they could all do it. So the snake thing isn't so wild. Not so wild. Because it's done even today, apparently, in certain marketplace situations. You can have a snake stiff, pick it up, and this is the opposite, of course. It's wriggling, and then I forget how, but you get what I'm trying to say. This is not so unheard of. Anyway, that's one sign. Another sign, put your hand in your blouse. It comes to leprosy, take it out, and it's cured. So now we're getting big signs like Jesus in the New Testament. Jesus in the New Testament has a lot of debt to the Moses stories. What's one of their even immediate debts when Pharaoh wants to kill all the Jewish children? How's that represented in the Gospels? Herod wants to kill all the Jewish children. So just like Moses escapes, Jesus escapes. Don't be angry at me if I say I don't believe either of them. They're good stories, but you're not going to kill all the children. Certainly the Jesus story is absolutely dependent on the Moses story, and it would be ludicrous for Herod to try to kill people in a certain area of his kingdom. He would have a revolt on his hands. I don't know how you think people behave when you try to take their children away from them and kill them. I mean, you're in serious trouble. It's just impossible to even conceive of. I know people accept this story without thinking when they hear it. Then it becomes part of their psyche. But honestly, think about it. Herod did not do that. He did not do that. And it's not even clear that the Moses story, but if the story is there, it's because of the Moses story. And a lot of the other miracles, according to Jesus, you'll find them in the Elijah stories. Between the Moses story and the Elijah stories are many of the Jesus stories. You say, oh, well, that means they happened. No, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that one author is dependent on the other author to present a prophet. It's mighty signs that prophets are supposed to have. I'm afraid there are no signs. For that, Muhammad, as you've been seeing Cheryl in the Islam class that we're doing, Muhammad's at least got that on top of some of the others. He doesn't claim any signs. What's his sign? One sign only.
His sign?
Yeah, what's his sign? Quran.
Oh, yeah.
He said, this is my sign, this book. If you can write a book like I wrote, okay, fine, but you can never do it, he says. Basically, he said, if you can write a book like me, okay, fine, but if you can't, shut up. That is the only sign in Islam, the Quran. And he's got something there. That is, I mean, he's the only guy so far that comes along with a sign that really is credible. Write something as good as I wrote, and I'll listen to you. If you can't, shut up. That's what the Muslims say, and they still say it, yes.
I mean, do you have any evidence, historically, scientifically, that the event did not take place, or that it did take place?
I don't have any evidence of any kind. I'm talking about what? What? Which I told you why I don't think that this event took place in killing all the Hebrew children and putting them into the river and all this sort of thing. Because I told you the Pharaoh is down 400 miles away. These are cities for what? He's talking to the Hebrew midwives. Oh, I already gave you the evidence for the. I thought we just went through that. The Moses story is largely fictionalized. Maybe they tried to kill some Hebrews. I don't know what they did, but not like the story presents it. And the Jesus story, yeah, I have evidence. Herod was a very unpopular ruler, and he was not going to start killing children in whole areas. He would never have survived it, okay?
I'm just curious. I don't know if there's something you got. I mean,
I just gave you the evidence. It would be a foolhardy. You know what people think of. What, you're going to go to a town and kill all of the children in a Semitic town, and you think you're going to get away with it? You know, I mean, come on. I mean, it's just crazy. But I don't have better proof than that. You know, I'm just an historian. I look at reality.
Just the other day, they kicked every Jew out of their home in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, well, Herod wasn't that. Herod, there's no evidence of it in Josephus, okay? And Josephus is a historian who would have recorded things. In fact, Herod killed his own children, is what he did, because he was afraid of them. And then what happened when he died, he wanted his successors to kill a lot of people so that there'd be mourning for him. But when the successors came, they let them all go because they knew they couldn't kill people like that. There's all kinds of stories in Josephus that gainsay it. I'm sorry, I don't have time for that. I just thought it was realistic to tell you I mean, these stories. Come on, honestly, I mean, you think that the New Testament story doesn't owe something to the Old Testament story about Pharaoh wanted to kill all of the Jewish children and Herod wanted to kill it? You don't think that the two are related?
no, I think that's definitely valid.
Well, then...
I'm just asking if there's anything to prove something.
Yeah, I can prove it. It's not mentioned in Josephus, who's a contemporary historian, who doesn't mention, in fact, just shows just the opposite. The only children Herod ever killed were his own, because he was jealous of them. And when they did want to kill people for their be mourning at his funeral, his successors let him go because they knew there would be huge uprising otherwise. And they never were that powerful. And taking the people out of Gaza, that's an organized Israeli government with a parliament and so on. And even then, they almost had civil war on that one. They weren't killing anybody.
What about the Holocaust?
The Holocaust, you're dealing with a Nazi regime. Yeah, well, you're dealing with a Nazi regime that has overwhelming force and modern techniques, an unarmed population. I mean, if in your mind the Holocaust is anything similar to Herod, you're like, you're just not even in the same ball.
I'm just saying, like, people are mistreated. I don't know. They've been mistreated since...
Well, a ruler who wants to survive does not kill his own people. Hitler's killing foreign people. He's not killing his own people. What, Hitler's going to go into Berlin and kill all of the German children? I mean, again, that's why I want to get you to think rationally. The examples you give me, I'm sorry to be tough. I've got to take a break and I'm trying to hurry here, but the examples you're giving aren't serious examples because they're not parallel. I mean, Hitler going into Poland or Ukraine and massacring people is the same as Herod going to his own kingdom and taking people out and trying to kill them all? Okay, in secret maybe, but in public? Yes, Saddam Hussein can take people out in private with secret police, but you're not going to take people out of families publicly without a huge uproar in the Middle East, not free people, and, you know, as again, read your secrets on see what the situation really was. It's nothing like the New Testament portrays. It's just a totally different universe. Sorry, I mean, I shouldn't make those asides because honestly, they are complicated. I wouldn't. Anyway, I'm sorry, we got to hurry up here. I'll talk in the break with you about that further. Let me go back here quickly. I want to finish this episode before we take a break here. So all this, the miracles, the signs, he puts his, again, I don't think I have to convince you that you can't put your hand in your shirt and it turned leprous and then they pull it out and it's healed. Now, I mean, if you think you can, I'm not in the same universe as you. I don't need to prove those points I would have thought in a scientific modern world. Well, this is a literary world, so it's possible. The New Testament is a literary world, so it's possible, but not in a scientific universe, it's not possible. The day you find me someone who can do this, I would really be, I'm willing to listen, and you can give me 10 billion people, there won't be one example of this happening. I don't even think that needs a proof, but never mind. Let's go on here to what the point of this story is. Look, I can't speak. This is what Freud picked up out of this, line 10. I'm not eloquent. Freud said that shows that he can't speak. Actually, it shows he doesn't speak Egyptian because he's supposed to go to Egypt and speak. But in any case, Freud said he was slow of speech. Yahweh said, who gave man his mouth? I'll help you speak, and I'll tell you what to say. And look, Moses said, look, I can't do this. I need help. Send anyone you will. Okay, here's his first mention of Aaron. There's Aaron the Levite, is there not? Now this doesn't look at this point that Moses and Aaron are brothers. It looks like they're tribal brothers. But in this story, at the moment where Aaron is introduced, we don't have any of the names of Moses' parents. We don't have any of the names of his sisters. When Aaron is introduced, he's just called Aaron the Levite. It doesn't say Aaron your brother, you see. He's called Aaron the Levite. What?
This actually says Aaron's your brother, Aaron.
Yeah, your brother, yeah, I mean, Aaron, it says your brother, Aaron the Levite. It doesn't say, it says your Levitical brother, tribal brother. If you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, it says your brother, but it doesn't say, he's called the Levite. I mean, you're all part of the Levite clan, is what I'm trying to say. So maybe that's an authentic brother, but I mean, it looks like a tribal brother. Unless these are all first generation sons of Levi, but they're not. I mean, these are not first generation. These are like, to give the genealogies, and they're like fourth or fifth generation sons of Levi, and probably much more than that if it's 400 years. In any case, it's a good point. Maybe you want to say that, you want to call that his brother, but it's called Aaron the Levite. It's a strange way to talk. Why isn't this called Moses the Levite? And so on. So, you know, it's, the fact that he's called Aaron the Levite sounds like he's not his brother here. Not his actual brother, but his tribal brother. Now, again, it may be that his, I'm going to make a point. The point I'm going to try to show is that the priests want Aaron to be Moses' brother. Is the point I'm going to try to show you as we go along. He's a good speaker. Here he comes to meet you, and he will help you. He will speak to the people in your place. He will be your mouthpiece, and you will be a God to him. So take this staff, and with this you will perform all the signs. So, okay, this is Moses saying, I can't do it. I need help. He's slow of speech. God says, I'll make you speak. Then he said, I need help still. Okay, here comes your brother Aaron the Levite, or your Levitical brother Aaron, your tribal brother Aaron. He's coming. But we didn't get an introduction of him to begin with that he's his actual brother. We don't have an introduction that Miriam is his actual sister either. The stories didn't know the name of any brothers, sisters, or mothers at that point. Anyway, I don't want to go too hard on that. You can see you're all angry at me tonight. So we will stop there, and we'll have a 10-minute break. I want to keep going, actually.